My God is able, friend. His word delivers men. His mercy has no end. My God is able. My God is able to cleanse your heart through and through. Give you a life so new. My God is able. God set me free from a life of misery. He saved my soul and set me in the heavenlies. Now I'm walking and talking. Well, I'm living His word so true. There is no limit to what God is able to do. My God is able, friend. His word delivers man. His mercy has no end. Whoa, my God is able. Now, my friend, if something is a trouble in you, my God is able and willing to deliver you too. You can walk and talk, while you can live His word so true. There is no limit to what God is able to do. Mercy has no end. Wow, my God is able. My God is able to cleanse your heart through and through. Give you a life so new. My God is able. Yeah, my God is able. My God is able. My God is able.
I'd like for you to take your Bibles tonight, please, and go to the book of Daniel, the 3rd chapter. On this, the occasion of the 199th anniversary of our country, I have a desire in my heart to share with you a message from the Old Testament that I believe speaks loudly to us as citizens of these, our United States. Previously, at another time in history, there was an empire, perhaps stronger even than these, our United States, are or ever have been. This empire was situated in Southwest Asia, in what today, of course, is in the area of what we refer to as Iraq. In the Old Testament, this empire is referred to as Akkad. Sometimes it's spelled A-C-C-A-D in the Bible. Sometimes it's spelled A-K-K-A-D. It is also referred to and used a number of times speaking of the plains of Shinar, S-H-I-N-A-R. At other times, there's a reference in the Bible to people who lived in the land of the Chaldeans. This empire on the north perhaps was bordered it's called Babylonia, the empire, and it was located in almost the exact geographical section of the world. It's in the area that at one time had in it what is referred to as the Garden of Eden in the Bible. It is the area from which Abraham came from a very great city of this particular empire called Ur of the Chaldees, that Abraham left. On the north, this empire is bordered by Assyria. To the east by the Persian hills, or as the Old Testament refers to it, Elam, E-L-A-M. On the west, you have the Arabian desert, and down at the south, the Persian Gulf. This was the empire known as the Babylonian Empire. It got its name from its capital city, the city of Babylon. This great city was situated in what is the geographical center of the world, and there in its day it sat like a diamond, as I heard someone say, on a couch of velvet. This great city was surrounded with double walls of protection. Those walls covered 17 miles to border the city. And the outside wall was wide enough that 2 chariots could have a race on it going around the city. In that great city, a vain yet fabulous and very great king called Nebuchadnezzar built what became known as one of the 7 wonders of the world, the Garden of Nebuchadnezzar. He built this garden for his wife, whose name was called Amytis, A-M-Y-T-I-S. She was a Median princess whom he had married. And the hanging gardens, one of the 7 wonders of the world, were built by Nebuchadnezzar for this beautiful queen. In it, up to this time, we have located, via archaeology, 53 major temples to different gods within the border of that great city of Babylon. The greatest 2 temples, of course, one is to Ishtar, and the other is the temple to Marduk. Ishtar was the god of fertility, or goddess of fertility. Marduk was the god or the sun god. Those were the 2 greatest temples. Now, the record of some things that occurred in the times of this great empire of Babylon is written in the book of Daniel. Daniel, the man of God, was a prophet living at that time, and things had occurred in the city of Jerusalem and in the tribes of Judah and Benjamin to the south. The temple in Jerusalem had been ransacked. The best of their young manhood had been taken as slaves to Babylon. The most beautiful women had been taken as slaves to Babylon. And that's why this record in Daniel needs to be considered here on this occasion of this Sunday night of the 199th anniversary of these our United States. Chapter 3. Nebuchadnezzar, the king, made an image of gold, whose height was 80 cubits, and the breadth thereof 6 cubits. He set it up in the plain of Dura, in the province of Babylon. Nebuchadnezzar had, on his expeditions, gone out to what is known as the world at that time, all the other empires, all the other kingdoms. And wherever he went, he captured their gods, and he brought their gods back to Babylon. He had the greatest collection of gods of any king that perhaps has ever lived. And when he would capture these gods of those countries and bring them back, he set them up in the city of Babylon. But he knew that he was bigger than any of the gods he had captured, because it just happens to be a law of logic that if you can capture that god, then you're bigger than that god. Right. So finally Nebuchadnezzar had the most brilliant idea he could ever have. He said, since I captured all the gods, there are none left to capture, I've got them all, then I must be God. So he had this statue made out of pure gold, over 100 feet high, and he set it out there on the plains of Dura. And he said, there is your God. Then he did something else. Nebuchadnezzar the king sent together the princes, the governors, the captains, the judges, the treasurers, the consulars, the sheriffs, and all the rulers of the provinces to come to the dedication of the image which Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. Then the princes, the governors, the captains, the judges, the treasurers, the consulars, the sheriffs, and all the rulers of the provinces were gathered together unto the dedication of the image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. And they stood before the image that Nebuchadnezzar had set up. And then a herald cried aloud, with might he caroled it forth, to you it is commanded, O people, nations, and languages, that at what time you hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, dulcimer, and all kinds of music, you fall down and worship the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. Now this is sort of remarkable that this King Nebuchadnezzar figured this all out, and he had seen that at these other gods people fall down, they'd worship him. So he decided that to this God that he had set up of himself, made out of pure gold, he would demand that whenever these things occurred, everybody would bow. Like today, some people look toward Mecca when they pray, somebody else toward Jerusalem, a few of us look to God. So, verse 6 says, and whoso falleth not down and worships shall the same hour be cast into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. Now that command had some heat in it. Not teeth, but heat. This was a declaration from the mightiest king of all times, Nebuchadnezzar. He not only, just said it one, he called in all the rulers from all those other countries that he had captured, brought them all back, and he says, fellas, I don't care where you live. If you're 1,000 miles from here or 5,000 at that hour, when these things occur, when this trumpet sounds and so forth, everybody down, facing toward the statue that he had built on the plains of Dura. Therefore, verse 7, at that time when all the people heard the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sax, psalter, and all kinds of music, all the people, the nations, and the languages fell down and worshipped the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. Wherefore at that time certain Chaldeans came near, and they accused the Jews. They spake and said to King Nebuchadnezzar, O king, live forever. Thou, O king, hast made a decree that every man that shall hear the sound of the cornet, the flute, the harp, psaltery, dulcimer, and all kinds of it shall fall down and worship the golden image. And whosoever falleth not down and worshipeth, that he shall be cast into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. Is that what the king had said? Exactly what the king had said. But you know, O king, there are certain Jews, Judeans, whom thou hast set over the affairs of the province of Babylon. And the reason he had set them over the province of Babylon is because what the man of God, Daniel, had done. For in the 2nd chapter, in verse 46, it says, the king Nebuchadnezzar fell upon his face and worshipped Daniel, and commanded that they should offer an oblation and sweet odors unto him. The king answered unto Daniel and said, of a truth, it is that your God is a God of gods and a Lord of kings and a revealer of secrets, seeing thou couldest reveal this secret. Then the king made Daniel a great man, and gave him many great gifts, and made him ruler over the whole province of Babylon, and chief of the governors over all the wise men of Babylon. Then Daniel requested of the king, and he set Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego over the affairs of the province of Babylon, but Daniel sat in the gate of the king. That's how 3 young, tremendous men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, got to those prominent positions of authority. But you must remember they were Judeans. They had come from a land that at least at one time had heard about the one God, to worship one God. They had remembered back in their minds, I am the Lord thy God, which hath brought thee forth out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. And here they were in a land, in positions of authority and power. And this great leader had set up this statue on the plains of Dura of himself, made out of pure gold, and he demanded that they worship that as God. And so after these commands were given, these 3 great men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, whenever the music played, they didn't bow. They didn't fall down on their face to worship that God. And naturally, there was a lot of jealousy. Because whenever you got men of God standing for God's word, all the unbelievers envy you, get jealous about you, want to defeat you, want to destroy you. And they figured the way to destroy them was to go back to the king and say, look, king, you got 3 great men here who are in responsible positions of authority, but you're the king. Therefore, O king, you live forever. They worked him real psychologically. And they said, you got those 3 fellows down here that are not bowing when they're supposed to. And this really was something. Because it says in verse 12, these men, O king, have not regarded thee. In other words, they didn't pay attention to what you said. They didn't believe it. They serve not thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast what? Then Nebuchadnezzar got in a rage and fury, got real teed up, and he commanded to bring Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Then they brought these men before the king. And Nebuchadnezzar spake and said unto them, is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? Do not ye serve my gods, nor worship the golden image which I have set up? Now, if ye be ready that at what time ye hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, and dulcimer, and all kinds of music, ye fall down and worship the image which I have made well. But if ye worship not, ye shall be cast the same hour into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. And who is that God that shall deliver you out of my hands? Boy, oh boy, imagine You're in a responsible position of authority, like the Attorney General, let's say, of a state. And you're called in. And you're set right down, and you look into the governor's eye and the cabinet, and they say to you, listen, man, you haven't obeyed our orders. You haven't carried them out. Who do you think's going to deliver you? Who's going to set you free? The old king laid it right on him. He said, who is that God that shall deliver you out of my hands? Nobody, because I'm King Nebuchadnezzar. Nobody can violate my orders. You can't do it. I've got the backing of the mafia and everybody else. All the unions, all the bureaucrats are supporting me right down the line. Nobody can touch me. Don't you know that? I'm even in charge of the World Bank. Sort of neat that these men were incarcerated and brought in, being men of that high authority and power. But maybe I ought to take you into a psalm and show you something about these men and that time. The 137th Psalm, please. By the rivers of Babylon. And the rivers of Babylon, Euphrates and Tigris. The Euphrates River went right through the center of that great city of Babylon. By the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down. Yea, we wept when we remembered Zion. When we remembered our homeland. When we remembered Jerusalem, when we remembered the worshiping of the true God. So, verse 2, we hanged our harps upon the willows in the midst thereof. For there they that carried us away captive required of us a song. They wanted a new song. And they that wasted us, that is, they laid heavy requirements upon us. They required of us mirth, saying, sing us one of the songs of Zion. They didn't anymore want to hear one of the songs of Zion, the barrel of monkeys, want a toothbrush. Right. Yeah, but you see, they want to make fun of them. Oh, so you came from Jerusalem. You were there where the man of God read the word to you. Is that right? You were there singing the songs of Zion. And yet you've come over here in our place, and you hanged your harps upon the willows. You're not singing anymore. Come on, let us hear you sing. We want to hear one of those great songs of life, you know. Let's hear you. They said, verse 4, how shall we sing the Lord's song in a strange land? And strange land is for unbelievers. How shall we sing the Lord's song in an unbeliever's land? These were those men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Men, the greatest that all Israel had left. The Hebrew children, wonderful, committed men. Men not only of religious conviction, but ability. They were not placed as heads of state under Nebuchadnezzar because they graduated from kindergarten. They were men of ability. They were trained, they were educated, they were highly qualified men. But they had been taken away captive into this land. They couldn't sing because it was a night time for them. The songs in the night could not be sung because there were no believers. If you read this record in Daniel, you'll see also that they tried to make them eat food that they were not allowed to eat, according to the commandments of God. Anything to break them down so they wouldn't stand for the true God. Just like they work on you and me in our country today to get us away from God's Word, to frighten us, to put fear into us. So they did here. And the old king said, look, I got this report. I don't care how great you are, how important you are. I'm King Nebuchadnezzar. Now either you obey those orders that I issued, else you're going to get thrown into that fiery furnace. Who is that God that shall deliver you out of my hands? That's what he yelled according to verse 15. Daniel 3. Who is that God you talk about? Who is that God that can deliver you? Look, I can get you shot anytime I want. I can get you out of your job. I can take anything away from you. I'm the head of the union. I'm the head of the bureaucratic department. I'm the governor. I'm the head. Nebuchadnezzar said to those men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, where is your God? What God you got that can protect you? And old Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, verse 16, and you listen to it. Nebuchadnezzar, we're not careful to answer thee in these matters. If it be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace. Our God is what? The king said to them, your God can do it. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego turned around and said, our God can do it. Now you've got a battle of minds. Where is your God that can deliver you? Nebuchadnezzar said. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego said, our God is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of thy hand, O king. Verse 18, be it known, but if not, be it known unto thee, O king, our God is able. Our God is what? Able. You know what they were saying? Our God is able, but if our believing's not big enough, it's okay. If our believing's not big enough, I want to tell you something, O king, that will not serve thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. That's commitment, ladies and gentlemen. That's commitment. That's right. That's even a bigger commitment than WW, I think, almost. That's right. The king said one thing, where's your God that'll deliver us? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego said, our God is able to deliver us. But if not, if our believing's not big enough for our God to deliver us, I want to tell you something, old Nebuchadnezzar. We're not going to bow down and we're not going to worship your golden image. Man, you can just see the dandruff falling off the king's head. That's right. Man, can you see the rage? He's in the fury. Imagine a governor saying that to a president or to a king. This is bigger. This is fantastic. That those three men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, were so committed in their heart that they could confront the greatest king perhaps of all time, Nebuchadnezzar, and look him straight in the eyeball and say to him, our God is able to deliver us. Our God is able to deliver us. Our God is able. But I'll tell you something, if not, we're still not going to bow down and worship and serve your golden image. That's telling the king. And I can just imagine how they felt. They were human beings, and they knew that when they made their declaration, their necks were on the block. You know, they could have gotten out of it so easily by just compromising, couldn't they? You bet your life. You know what they could have said? Shad could have come back and he said, Neb, you've been real good to us, we're buddies. And, from time to time you've been giving us that underneath the table occasionally. And, we didn't mean it, but we had a little problem. Our people were there, and we wanted to keep them happy in our particular precinct. We wanted to take good care of them, and therefore we didn't bow. But he said, we'll do it, King. But maybe we can do it behind the door. We can get in our private little office, and then when the music sounds, then the people won't see us. How about it, King? See, they could have compromised. They didn't compromise. The moment you compromise, you're dead, people. The moment you compromise one iota on God's word, you're done. These men stood before that king and they said, our God's able, but if not, we're still not going to bow down and serve you. Boy. Then Nebuchadnezzar was really teed off. He was not just in fury, he was full of it. Verse 19. You could just see the blood, the red coming up in his face. He was just mattering a little red hen before breakfast or something. Even the form of his visage was changed. Those blood veins and stuff stood out in his neck. Was changed against Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego. Therefore he spake, and he commanded that they should heat the furnace 7 times more than it was wont to be heated. That is a hot furnace. Ordinarily, you bring a furnace to what you call is nice fire. This one, the king was so angry about it that anybody would have the audacity to defy him, King Nebuchadnezzar, who knew that he was God. He said, fellas, throw the coal to those furnaces. And they heated them 7 times as hot as they were wont to be heated. Brought them right up to that point where they were just ready to blow the lid off the steam pipe or something. The valve loose, right. And then, you know what else he did? He commanded the most mighty men, the most valiant men, the greatest men of war that he had in his whole army, to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and to cast them into the fiery furnace. Then these men were bound in their mantles, their hosen, their turbans, and other garments, and they were cast into the midst of the burning fiery furnace, which had been heated 7 times as hot as you ordinarily would put the fire in that furnace. Therefore, verse 22, because the king's commandment or word was urgent, and the furnace exceeding hot, the sparks of the fire coming out of that furnace slew those mighty men whom the king had ordered to throw Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in. And these 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell down, bound, in the midst of the burning fiery furnace. That's right. That's quite an experience, class. You see, it's so far beyond my mind, I cannot understand it from an experiential point of view, but because I believe it is because I believe the Word of God is the will of God. That it means what it says. I don't understand electricity either, but I use it. I don't understand how hot a fire would be 7 times as hot, and that these 3 wonderful men, believers, men who believed God, who had the audacity to say to the king, we may burn, but we're not going to bow, O king. You can burn us if you want to, but we're not going to bow. We may turn out to be crispy, but if we do, we're still not going to bow. That's right. Just imagine 3 men making that statement to that great king. Boy, that make God sit up in heaven. Because this doesn't happen on earth very often. It's usually compromise with government men. Compromise. Put an extra little rider on the bill to get it through. Compromise. These men refuse to compromise. And ladies and gentlemen, if I see this picture at all, when those 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, said to the old king, we may burn, but we're not going to bow, O king. We may burn in your fiery furnace because we can't get our believing up big enough for our God's able to deliver us. But if not, we still aren't going to bow, O king. You know what God did? He stood up in heaven and took a look down to earth. That's right. He said, my goodness. Woo. Yeah. I haven't seen this for a whole cold winter summer months or something. Anybody believing like that down there? Little old Shad, you know. And little old me. Check. And little to bed you go, you know, that. Yeah. That's my boys down there. Saying to old king over here, you may be throw us in, but we're not going to bow. You may burn us. And do you know what God decided up in heaven at that moment? If you don't bow, you won't burn. That was the decision of the hierarchy. God. Right. They said to the king, you may burn us, we won't bow. God said, if you don't bow, you won't burn. That was orders from headquarters. That's right. But the old king got him, tied them all up, threw them in the fiery furnace. The fellows who threw them in burned. Verse 24. It's the first time anybody got stoned. Nebuchadnezzar the king was stoned. After he'd thrown him in there, the king was absolutely amazed. He was so amazed, if he'd have had glass eyeballs, they'd have rolled down the aisle or something. Right. And he rose up in haste, and he spake, and he said to his top brass, his governors, did not we cast 3 men bound in the midst of the fiery furnace? They answered and said, true, O king, we did our... And he said, but fellas, look, I see 4 men loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they have no hurt, and the form of the 4th is like the Son of God. Glory. Isn't that fantastic? The men who threw them in burned to a crisp. some little period of time afterwards, somebody said, "Oh, king, 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 come on, take a look. Take a look." And old king stood back there, and he looked in that old fiery furnace. And he said, "Did we not throw 3 in there?" And all the fellows said, "We sure did, king. We sure did." But the king, how's come then I see 4 in there?" "Well, they threw 3 in, I see 4. And they're not burned to a crisp." As someone once said, they're walking around in that old fiery furnace arm in arm and singing, "We are marching," or something. WOW's on the move. That's right. And the king says the 4th is like the Son of what? Right. Doesn't say it is the Son of God. It says like him. And sons of God in Job and the rest, angels. Who is the top angel that's responsible to fight for the Lord's believers? Michael. Right. That was the man, the spirit who did the job. Got in there and told Nebuchadnezzar he looked like one of the boys. Right. You know, I think Oral Roberts in his great day had the greatest sermon I've ever heard on this part of the Word in his great day when he believed God. And I think it was he that uses the phrase that at this certain moment when God saw that King Nebuchadnezzar's men were really going to throw Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego into the fiery furnace, that he got this angel and he grabbed 3 asbestos suits out of the resources of heaven, made a trip down in the fiery furnace, and when they threw old Shadrach in, he caught him, wrapped the asbestos suit around him, set him up there in a corner. Yeah. Meshach came in next. He wrapped his asbestos suit around him, set him in the corner. And then finally Abednego got thrown in. He wrapped it around, set it in the corner, and then he just grabbed the arms of all the fellows and they started parading around the furnace. Did we not throw 3 in? But I see 4, and the 4th, it's like the Son of God. Boy, oh boy. Then Nebuchadnezzar came near to the mouth of burning fiery furnace and spake and said, "Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, ye servants of the Most High God, come forth, come hither." Hey, this was the same king who said, "I'm God." These were the same men who had looked him in the face and said, "Look, you may burn us, but we're not going to bow." They were the same men who said to him, "Our God is able to deliver us, but if not, we're not going to bow." Now he sees them there, beautiful, perfect, not even a smell of smoke on them. Nothing burned, nothing hurt. And so he looks in and he says, "Well, that God you serve's got to be bigger than I am. You must be serving the one and only true God." "Come forth, come hither." Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came forth out of the midst of the fire. And the princes and governors and captains and kings, counselors being gathered together, saw these men, upon whose body the fire had no power, hadn't hurt them, nor was an hair of their head singed, neither was their coat changed, nor was the smell of fire upon them. And I want to tell you something, that's got to be something. Because sitting around the campfire in the woods this week one evening, I'm sure that many of us had a little smell of smoke on us. These boys were thrown in the hottest fire that's ever been made outside of hell, and it was hell to get thrown in. But boy, they were not hurt. There wasn't even a smell of smoke on them. You talk about our God being able to deliver. Most of our commitment and our believing today is piking stuff compared to that one. If I would spiritualize this, I'd call it life's fiery furnaces and talk to you, but I'm not going to spiritualize it. I'm interested in the literal accuracy of the word, not the spiritualization of it. Nebuchadnezzar spake and said, Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He didn't know anything about him, but he knew they had a bigger God than he was. So he said, okay, fellas, it's your God. Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who hath sent his what? Angel, I told you, and delivered his servants. Delivered his servants who trusted in him, and have changed the king's word and yielded their bodies that they might not serve nor worship any god except their own God. Boy, oh boy. May I read it to you again? Who hath sent his what? Angel, and delivered his sons. His what? Servants. But you are not a servant. You are a son of God when you're born again. Can you for one moment believe that God would do less for his sons than he would for his servants? No, but we've been so talked out of the power of God. We live so long in a world of unbelief where men of authority and power without God have ruled. That we as sons live far below par, more so than even God's servants in Old Testament. Ladies and gentlemen, God has not changed. He is the same yesterday, today, and forever. His Son, Jesus Christ, is God's only begotten Son. He has not changed, and he is seated at the right hand of God, making intercession for the saints according to the will of God. That's better than having the governor to intercede for me. That's better to have than to have any high-ranking government official interceding. It is God being interceded to by the Lord Jesus Christ, his only begotten Son, in your behalf and in mine. And have changed the king's word. They sure did change the king's word. The king said, if you don't bow, you'll burn. They changed it. He threw them into burn. They hadn't bowed, they didn't burn. Yielded their bodies that they might not serve nor worship any god except their own God. Now the king's going to make another decree. Typical king. Therefore, I make a new decree. I make a decree that every people, nation, and language that speak anything amiss against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be cut in pieces. Their house... Their houses shall be cut, their houses shall be made a dunghill, because there's no other God that can deliver after this what? That's right. So immediately the king, he writes a new recommendation. See? Before this he said, I'm king, I'm God. Now, after Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego had proven something to him, he says, there is no other God that can deliver after this sort. And ladies and gentlemen, it took one of the great pagan kings of all time to tell that truth. Today, believers don't even believe that. Born-again believers many times do not believe what that great unbeliever said in that day. There is no other God that can deliver after this sort. The God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Men who had gone in captivity and refused to sing the songs of Zion had hung their harps on a willow, because how can we sing the songs of Zion in an unbelieving land? Men who had hazarded their lives for the integrity and accuracy of that one God. And when the king said, "You've got to fall down and bow to my golden image," they said, "King, we won't do it. We may die, but if we die, we're going to die believing in our one God." And finally the king said, "There is no other God that can deliver after this sort." Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. If you can read in between the lines of some of the things I've taught you tonight, ladies and gentlemen, our land is about ready for captivity. And the only way we're ever going to keep the freedom of our land, if some of you, all of you, take a stand for the integrity and accuracy of God's word and again say it, "Thus saith the Lord." We're not going to bow down and serve your gods of money and power. We're not going to bow down to serve your union prestige or your mafias or anything else. Our God is able to deliver. But if not, we're still not going to bow. We're going to stand for God and the greatness of his word in our day and in our time. And I believe with all my heart tonight that if we do not bow, we're not going to burn. And if we do bow, we're going to lose everything. Because the so-called Christian church has done nothing but bow and compromise. You cannot compromise on God and his word. The moment you compromise one iota, you'll burn. They make you tremendous prophecies. How they'll protect you, how they'll guard you, how they'll be concerned about your interest. Don't you ever believe it. They're not concerned about protecting you, your property, or your interest. They're only concerned about themselves. And when they get into that power position, you will be the first to die. So let's stand up while we have freedom and be counted in our America. Let's go back out in those fields as WOWs and just tell it like it is with the love of God shed abroad in your hearts by the Holy Spirit. And ladies and gentlemen, I believe that if we don't bow, we won't burn. And I believe with all my heart if we bow, we're going to burn. And I believe that our God will stand with us if we don't compromise on God's word. And say again to our local officials and the school boards in the community, the trustees, the county commissioners, all the way up to the governors of the state, and then take it to the federal government. If we again say to our people, look, no underhanded stuff. Tell it like it is or shut up. No extra riders on bills just to get them through. Look, if you're going to serve, serve honestly. If not, we're going to elect somebody who will. Somebody who will love God. Somebody who will serve the true God. Ladies and gentlemen, we have been loaded with church people in government positions, and they haven't taken that stand. God's not interested in church people. He's interested in believers, be they church people or not church people. God never made one of those denominations to begin with. He makes believers, born again ones, right? You betcha. Boy, class, I believe with all my heart that this is the hour. We got to get America back into God. And the greatness of that word has to be declared by men and women who have a knowledge of it like you. You know enough of God's word to speak it. And let's say it with that same greatness again today. Our God is able. We know that his ability equals his willingness. Our God is able and our God is willing to deliver us and our nation and our people But if not, if my believing is not big enough, I still am not going to succumb to the graft. I'm not going to succumb to the power structure. I'm not going to give in to the moneyed men or anyone else. I'm going to stand on that integrity and accuracy of God's word. If I have to die, I'll stand. Then I believe, ladies and gentlemen, our God will again honor our people and our country. This is the week of July the 4th. Take a stand.
Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego. Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego. Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego. To just praise the Lord.
Just praise the Lord.
To just praise the Lord.
Hey, praise the Lord.
To just praise the Lord.
Just praise the Lord.
To just praise the Lord.
Just praise the Lord.
Down in that old Babylon, where lots of hanky-pank went on. Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego. To just praise the Lord.
Just praise the Lord.
To just praise the Lord.
Just praise the Lord.
To just praise the Lord.
Just praise the Lord.
To just praise the Lord.
Hey, praise the Lord.
Old King Nebuchadnezzar made himself an image of gold. When you hear the sackbut psaltery, you gotta bow on down.
You gotta bow on down.
You gotta bow on down.
You better bow on down.
You gotta bow on down.
You gotta bow on down.
You gotta bow on down.
You better bow on down.
Old King Nebuchadnezzar said, if you don't bow, you'll surely burn. I'll throw you in the fiery furnace, and I'll turn it up.
7 times as hot.
7 times as hot,
I'll turn it up.
and I'll turn it up.
Mucho más caliente.
7 times as hot.
I'll turn it up.
Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego said, we won't bow and we won't burn. God won't let that happen to us. We just praise the Lord. We just praise the Lord.
Just praise the Lord.
We just praise the Lord.
Just praise the Lord.
We just praise the Lord.
Just praise the Lord.
Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, man. Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, man. Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego.
Who was
That
man?
they just praise the Lord. Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego. Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego. Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego. They just praise the Lord.
When I look inside myself, I see a thing that no one else could ever take away from me. I'll have it for eternity, the love of God. And when I see my family gathered round, it comforts me and washes from my memory the times when I just could not see the love of God. And I thank you, Lord, for calling out my name. Yes, I just want to thank you that I'll never be the same again. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Lord. And when I read His matchless word, I'm filled with things I've never heard. My mind is free, my heart is light, my eyes behold a lovely sight, the love of God. And when I think that He loved me so, to send His only Son to go and die for people just like me, through tears of joy I began to see the love of God. And I thank you, Lord, for calling out my name. Yes, I just want to thank you that I'll never be the same again. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Lord. Viene con la edad de conocer lo que mis ojos pueden ver, con la esperanza en la vida que yo vivo, con el amor de Dios.
Darle pensamiento como darle nacimiento a la mañana de mi corazón. Querer con el motivo del amor de Dios.
has llamado Dios, palabra de verdad. Agradecido que mi vida es renovada con el amor de Dios. Sing it, Billy. El amor de Dios. And I thank you, Lord, for calling out my name. Yes, I just want to thank you that I'll never be the same again.